The transition wasn't a portal, it was a physical assault. 1 second, the 1967 Chevy Impala was tearing through a Kansas thunderstorm, wipers slapping against the deluge. The next, gravity inverted, the air pressure popped Dean Winchester's eardrums, and the world screamed. They didn't land. They collided with the earth. The Impala hit the ground with the violence of a sledgehammer striking a bell. The suspension shrieked, a horrific metal-on-metal agony that vibrated straight up Dean's spine. The car fishtailed across cracked, parched earth, obliterating a petrified tree that exploded into gray dust before slamming to a halt. Silence followed. Not the quiet of a library, but the heavy, ringing silence of a mausoleum. Dean gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles were white, the leather biting into his skin. He didn't breathe for 3 seconds. He just listened to the engine. It sputtered, coughed a dry, rattling wheeze, and died. "Sammy!" Dean's voice sounded muffled, like he was speaking underwater. Sam groaned from the passenger seat, peeling his face off the dashboard. A thin line of blood trickled from his hairline. "Alive, I think." Dean kicked his door open. The heat hit him instantly, a physical wall of dry, irradiated air that tasted of copper pennies and old sulfur. It sucked the moisture right out of his eyes. He stepped out, boots crunching on soil that looked like diseased skin. "Where?" Sam stumbled out, clutching a glowing scroll that was rapidly turning to ash in his hands. He looked up. The sky wasn't right. It was a bruised, sickly yellow-green, thick with roiling clouds that trapped the heat. Green lightning arced silently from cloud to cloud, illuminating a landscape of shattered craters and twisted rebar skeletons. "Kansas doesn't look like this," Dean muttered, racking the slide on his pearl-handled 1911. The mechanical clack-clack was the only familiar sound in this alien hell. "The Geiger counter," Sam whispered, tapping the modified EMF meter in his hand. The needle was buried in the red, vibrating so hard it looked ready to snap. "Dean, the air, it's hot, not temperature hot, radiation hot." Boom! The ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a footstep. Dean spun around. "You hear that? Something big." From behind a ridge of jagged fused glass, 40 yards away, a nightmare stood up. It was the color of dried blood and pavement. 12 feet of muscle and hate hunched over massive, powerful legs. Horns curled back from a skull that looked like a demon's rejected draft. But it was the claws, long, serrated scythes dragging in the dirt, that made Dean's stomach drop. A death claw. The beast sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. It smelled the ozone of the rift. It smelled the gasoline leaking from the Impala. It smelled fresh meat. "Okay," Dean said, his voice tight. "That's a dragon. That is a straight-up dragon without wings." "Dean, don't shoot it," Sam hissed, backing up slowly. "Why not?" "Because look at it. It's covered in armored plating. It's a tank made of angry meat." The Deathclaw roared, a sound that wasn't a noise, but a concussion wave that rattled Dean's teeth in his skull. It charged. It didn't run like an animal. It moved with terrifying, fluid speed, kicking up plumes of radioactive dust. "Eat lead, Godzilla!" Dean leveled the 1911 and fired. Bang! 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 The heavy .45 caliber rounds sparked against the creature's chest. Ping! Ping! They ricocheted off the hide like pebbles thrown at a bank vault. "It's bulletproof!" Dean yelled, panic finally piercing his hunter's calm. "Trunk, get the iron!" "Iron won't burn it, Dean! It's biological!" The beast was on them. It swiped at the Impala. The sound of claws tearing through the trunk lid was screeching and absolute, like a can opener tearing through tin. Dean dove, hitting the dirt and rolling. The grit scraped his cheek raw. "Run!" Dean scrambled up. "Into the ruins! Move!" They sprinted toward the skeletal remains of a collapsed factory, lungs burning with the toxic air. The Deathclaw roared again, frustrated by the car, and turned its gaze toward the fleeing prey. They dove through a hole in the brick wall just as the beast slammed into the exterior. The impact shook dust from the ceiling beams. A massive claw reached through the gap, blindly groping. The tip of a talon hooked Dean's leather jacket, slicing the fabric but missing the skin. "Upstairs." Sam pointed to a rusted metal staircase. They scrambled up the swaying metal grate. The Deathclaw started tearing the brick wall down, chunk by chunk, to squeeze inside. They reached a catwalk overlooking the factory floor. Below, the monster squeezed through the widened hole. It looked up, intelligent yellow eyes locking onto them. It crouched, massive thigh muscles bunching. "It can jump," Dean said, staring down. "Sam, tell me it can't jump." "It can definitely jump." The Deathclaw launched itself. It cleared 20 feet of air effortlessly, its claws hooking the edge of the catwalk. The metal groaned and buckled under the weight. Dean slid, nearly going over the rail. He looked up. Above the beast hung a massive, corroded industrial container suspended by a rusted chain. The label, barely legible, read, "Flammable acetone." "The chain!" Sam yelled. "Dean, shoot the chain!" Dean raised the 1911. His hand was shaking. He steadied it with his other hand. He took a breath, tasting the sulfur. "Say cheese, ugly." Bang! The bullet struck the rusted link. It snapped with a sharp twang. Gravity took over. The container dropped like a guillotine. Crash! It smashed onto the Deathclaw, pinning it to the concrete floor. The beast shrieked, thrashing under the ton of steel, drenching the floor in foul-smelling chemical fluid. Dean grabbed a road flare from his jacket pocket, standard hunter issue. He cracked the cap. It hissed, sputtering red phosphorescent light. "Chew on this." He dropped the flare. Whoosh! The acetone ignited. The factory floor vanished in a sudden, violent wall of heat and orange fire. The Deathclaw's scream changed pitch, high, frantic, animalistic panic. The fire consumed the oxygen in the room. The beast wasn't dead, but it was terrified. It smashed back out through the wall, trailing fire, fleeing into the wasteland. Dean slumped against the railing, chest heaving. The heat was unbearable now. "Okay," Dean rasped, wiping sweat and grime from his eyes. Note to self: fire works. Sam stared at the burning hole in the wall, his face pale in the firelight. "Welcome to the apocalypse, Dean." They had been walking for hours. The sun was a brutal, unblinking eye that baked the radiation into the asphalt. They had left the Impala hidden under a tarp of camouflage netting Sam had scavenged from the trunk. Dean looked miserable. He limped slightly, favoring his left knee. He was thirsty, a deep, scratching thirst that made his throat click when he swallowed. "We left her, Sam," Dean muttered, kicking a rusted hubcap. It skittered loudly across the broken road. "We left baby in a ditch, surrounded by Godzilla lizards." "We couldn't drive her," Sam said, checking the Geiger counter. The clicking was a constant, low-level rhythm of anxiety. "The intake is clogged with dust. We need parts. We need a mechanic." "I need a beer," Dean corrected, "and a burger, a real one, not this cram stuff we found in that cooler." They crested a hill. Below them stretched a broken highway interchange. Loops of concrete collapsed like ribbons. In the valley below, a skirmish was unfolding. Two groups. One side was human. Ragtag armor, tricorn hats, laser muskets that looked like they were built in a garage. The Minutemen. The other side was monstrous. Hulking green giants, 8 feet tall, with muscles that bulged like tumors. They carried sledgehammers made of engine blocks and boards with rebar spikes. Super mutants. Demons. Dean dropped to a crouch behind a Jersey barrier. Sam squinted. No black smoke, no possession signs. They looked like orcs. Orcs. We're doing Lord of the Rings now. Down below, one of the super mutants shouted. The voice was deep, guttural, and wet. It boomed across the valley. Humans taste like chicken! Smash them! A Minuteman was thrown through the air, hitting the side of a rusted bus with a sickening wet crunch. Dean's jaw tightened. They're killing those people. Dean, we don't know the politics here, Sam warned, hand hovering over his Taurus. For all we know, the green guys are the locals. Sam, the green guy just yelled that humans taste like chicken. That makes him the monster. Dean racked the slide on his 1911. Saving people, hunting things. The family business, Sam sighed, drawing his weapon. They slid down the embankment, dirt cascading around their boots. The Minutemen were losing. Only 2 were left standing, pinned behind a barricade of tires. A super mutant suicider broke from the pack. In its right hand, it clutched a mini-nuke like a football. A red light on the bomb blinked rapidly. Beep, beep, beep. Only one of us survives this, the mutant roared, charging the barricade. Hey, Green Giant! The suicider turned. Dean stood on top of a wrecked, fin-tailed Corvega sedan, 40 yards away. He held a sawed-off shotgun in his left hand and his pistol in the right. He looked like a cowboy who had taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque. You dropped your football! Dean raised the pistol. He didn't aim at the mutant's head. He aimed at the glowing red light in its hand. Dean, that's a nuke! Get down! Sam yelled, diving behind a concrete pillar. Dean fired. Bang! The bullet sparked against the casing of the mini-nuke. Kaboom! A miniature sun was born in the middle of the highway. The shock wave flattened the grass. The suicider vanished in a cloud of pink mist and white fire. The blast knocked the other 2 super mutants flat on their backs. Dean shielded his eyes from the flash, grinning like a kid on the 4th of July. Did you see that? That was awesome! You're an idiot, Sam yelled, ears ringing. The remaining 2 mutants recovered. They were furious. Tiny Man break toy! Kill Tiny Man! They charged. One wielded a board with nails. The other fired a crude pipe rifle. Bullets chipped the concrete near Sam's head. Left flank! Sam moved in, tactical and fast. He fired 3 rounds into the knee of the pipe rifle mutant. The bullets penetrated the green flesh with a wet thwack, but the mutant barely slowed down. They're sponges! Headshots only! Sam yelled. The bored mutant swung at Dean. Dean ducked, feeling the wind of the weapon ruffle his hair. He jammed the cold steel of the sawed-off into the mutant's gut. Eat this! Boom! The buckshot tore a hole in the creature's stomach. Green blood sprayed over Dean's shirt. The mutant staggered back, looking down at the wound with confusion. Stomach hurt. Dean pistol whipped it across the jaw. The mutant stumbled but grabbed Dean by the throat. The grip was iron. It lifted Dean off the ground effortlessly. Sam! A little help! Dean choked, kicking his legs. Sam saw a discarded machete on the ground. He slid, grabbed the rusted handle, and swung in one fluid motion. Whack! The blade bit deep into the mutant's hamstring. The creature roared and dropped to one knee, releasing Dean. Dean gasped, air rushing back into his lungs. He rolled, grabbed his shotgun, and shoved it under the mutant's chin. Lights out! Boom! The mutant fell backward, heavy and dead. Silence returned to the highway, save for the crackle of burning tires. The remaining Minuteman peeked out from behind his cover. He was young, his face smeared with dirt, his laser musket trembling in his hands. Dean stood up, wiping green ichor off his face with his sleeve. "Great," Dean grimaced, looking at the slime. "It's slime. Why is it always slime?" The Minuteman approached slowly. I've never seen anyone fight like that. Who are you, Brotherhood?" Dean straightened his leather jacket, checking his reflection in the car window. "No, we're the Winchesters." "We're travelers," Sam interjected, stepping up. "We need information, and we need to know where to find a mechanic." The Minuteman looked at the dead mutants, then at the nuke crater still radiating heat. "Diamond City," the kid stammered. "You want Diamond City. It's the green jewel." "Jewel implies rich," Dean said, looking at Sam. "Rich implies whiskey." "We're going to Diamond City," Sam agreed. Night in the Commonwealth did not fall. It bruised. The sky deepened into a suffocating purple bruise, the radiation haze catching the moonlight and scattering it into a sickly, luminescent fog. Dean stumbled. His left boot caught on a protruding piece of rebar, sending a jolt of pain up his bad knee. He hissed through his teeth, gripping his thigh. The leather of his jeans was stiff with dried mud and the sweat of the day's heat. "You okay?" Sam asked, his voice low. He was scanning the darkness with the useless EMF meter, simply out of habit. "Peachy," Dean spat, straightening up. "Just need a drink, and a bed, and maybe to shoot something that isn't green." Bark, bark, bark. The sound cut through the oppressive silence like a gunshot. It was sharp, frantic, and unmistakably canine. Dean froze. His expression, usually set in a mask of hunter's grit, softened instantly. He tilted his head, listening to the echo bouncing off the concrete skeleton of a collapsed highway overpass. "Is that?" Dean whispered. "Sounds like a dog," Sam said, squinting into the gloom. "It sounds like it's in trouble." Dean moved. The limp vanished, replaced by the fluid adrenaline of the hunt. He slid down the embankment, shale and loose dirt cascading around his boots. Sam followed, drawing his Taurus, the metal cold against his palm. At the bottom of the ravine, trapped against a rusted guardrail and a stagnant pool of oily water, was a German shepherd. He was snarling, hackles raised, teeth bared in a desperate defense. Surrounding him were 5 nightmares. They were the size of cats, but hairless. Their skin was pink and wrinkled, covered in lesions. Their teeth were the worst part, long, curved chisels that protruded from their mouths like tusks. They hissed, a wet, sibilant sound, burrowing in and out of the soft, irradiated earth. Mole rats. One of the rats lunged. The dog snapped, catching it by the neck and shaking it violently, but another rat bit into the dog's flank. The dog yelped, a high, pained sound that twisted a knife in Dean's gut. "Hey! Ugly!" Dean didn't fire. Ammo was gold. He reached into his belt and pulled the rusted machete he'd swiped from the skirmish site. The handle was wrapped in friction tape that felt gritty against his palm. The mole rats turned, their beady blind eyes fixed on the new heat source. "Pick on someone with thumbs." A rat leaped at Dean, jaws snapping. Dean pivoted on his back heel, swinging the machete in a flat arc. Thwack! The blade connected with a wet, meaty impact. It sliced the rat clean in half mid-air. 2 distinct pieces hit the mud. Blood, dark, viscous, and smelling of burning hair and rot, sprayed over Dean's boots. Dean gagged, covering his nose with his sleeve. "Oh God, the smell! It's like a skunk ate a corpse!" Sam slid down next to him, pistol raised. "They burrow! Watch your feet!" The ground erupted beneath Sam. A rat gnawed at the leather of his boot. Sam kicked it off, hard, and stomped. Crunch! The sound of hollow bones breaking was sickeningly loud. "Gross!" Sam grimaced, wiping his boot on the grass. The dog took the opening. He lunged at the remaining rats, tearing into them with a ferocity that surprised even Dean. He wasn't a pet. He was a warrior. Within seconds, the rats were dead, twitching piles of pink meat sinking into the mud. Silence returned. The dog stood there, panting, blood on his muzzle. He looked at Dean. He didn't run. He tilted his head, intelligent brown eyes assessing the threat. Dean crouched, holstering the machete. He held out a hand, palm up. The leather of his jacket creaked. "You okay, buddy?" The dog approached cautiously. He sniffed Dean's hand, his wet nose cold against Dean's skin. Then slowly he licked the mole rat blood off Dean's knuckles. He whined, a low rumbling sound in his chest. Dean grinned. It was the first real smile he'd had since Kansas. "Yeah, you're a good boy, a real survivor." "Dean," Sam warned, holstering his gun. "We can barely feed ourselves." "Look at him, Sam. No mutations, just a classic dog. He's got a collar." Dean fingered the red bandana tied around the dog's neck. The fabric was frayed, smelling of dust and old loyalty. Someone cared about him. Dean scratched behind the dog's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, his tail thumping a slow, rhythmic beat against the guardrail. "We're keeping him." "Dean, he fights, he tracks, and he's better company than you. We're keeping him." Sam sighed, looking at the carnage. "Mole rats, that's what the law calls them." "Law? You mean that survival guide you found in the trash?" "It's a book, Dean. And yes." Suddenly the dog's ears perked up. He stiffened. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat, vibrating against Dean's hand. He turned toward the shadows of the ruins ahead, teeth bared. Dean stood up instantly, hand dropping to his 1911. "What is it, boy?" "Something's watching us," Sam whispered. "What's your name?" "Buster." "Rex?" The dog barked once, sharp, alert. "Dog meat?" Dean guessed, remembering the name scrawled on a wall nearby. "That's what the kid called you?" The dog barked again, tail wagging once. "Dog meat? Seriously? That's dark, even for us." "Dean, the needle is jumping." Sam held up the Geiger counter. "We're near the city limits." Dean stood up. The dog meat, trotted to his side, perfectly healing. "All right, dog meat, lead the way. Find us a drink." The structure was monolithic. Even in the dark, the green monster loomed over them, a sheer cliff of painted steel and concrete that blocked out the stars. It wasn't a stadium anymore, it was a fortress. Spotlights swept the cracked pavement, their beams cutting through the fog like solid bars of light. High above, machine gun turrets hummed with a menacing electric vibration, tracking their movement. The signage, painted in sloppy, dripping white letters over the fading green, read, "Diamond City, the Great Green Jewel." "Fenway Park," Dean breathed, staring up. "The Cathedral of Boston." And they turned it into a scrap heap. "It's defensible, Dean," Sam noted, analyzing the tactical layout. "High walls, limited entry points. It makes sense for a settlement." "It's sacrilege. Dad took me here when I was 10. We ate hot dogs and watched the Sox lose. Now, look at it. It's covered in spikes." They approached the massive blast doors. The steel was cold and pitted with rust. Dog meat trotted beside Dean, ears swiveling toward the sound of a voice shouting near the intercom. A woman stood at the gate. She wore a bright red leather trench coat that stood out against the gray world like a flare. A newsboy cap was pulled low over her eyes. She was kicking the heavy steel door with a rhythmic thud, thud, thud. "Danny, open the gate!" she yelled, her voice raspy with frustration. "I know you can hear me! I'm not going to stand out here and get eaten by a yaoguai!" Static crackled from the speaker box. "Sorry, Piper. Mayor's orders. You've been stirring up too much trouble with that article about the synths." "Trouble? It's called news, Danny. The truth." Piper threw her hands up. She turned, spotting Sam and Dean emerging from the gloom. Her eyes narrowed, scanning them. The weapons, the grit, the dog. A scheme lit up behind her eyes. "Hey!" she hissed, lowering her voice. "You too? You look like you've walked 100 miles and killed everything in between." "Something like that," Dean said, hand drifting near his holster. "Want to get inside? Play along." Piper turned back to the intercom, her voice shifting into a theatrical booming tone. "Danny, listen! I found some traders from, Quincy. They've got supplies. Clean water. Cram." "Quincy?" Sam whispered to Dean. "Just roll with it. I want a drink." "Traders? We haven't had a caravan from Quincy in months." "That's because the roads are dangerous," Piper winked at Dean. "But these guys, look at them. One of them has a jawline you could cut glass with, and the other looks like a sad puppy. They're the real deal." Dean bristled. "Sad puppy?" Sam shrugged. "Jawline?" The ground shook. Deep within the wall, massive hydraulic gears began to turn. The sound was a deafening metallic screech that made Dean's teeth ache. Dust rained down from the frame as the blast doors groaned to open, revealing a slice of yellow light. "Works every time," Piper smirked, tipping her cap. "Welcome to the show, boys." They stepped inside. Dean stopped dead. It wasn't a stadium. It was a shantytown built inside the skeleton of a stadium. The infield was a crowded, chaotic marketplace. Shacks made of sheet metal, old billboards, and bus parts were stacked on top of each other, defying gravity. Lanterns strung on fishing lines swayed in the breeze. The smell hit them instantly, a dense, humid cloud of boiling noodles, stale beer, ozone from neon signs, and the musk of unwashed bodies living too close together. A guard walked by. He wore umpire pads reinforced with leather and carried a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. He wore a catcher's mask as a helmet. "Is that guy wearing a catcher's mask as a combat helmet?" Dean asked, horrified. "It's a culture, Dean," Sam said, looking around. "Based on baseball? Get your swatters here!" A vendor shouted from a stall made of green plywood. He was dressed in a full, dirty baseball uniform, swinging a bat menacingly. "Genuine hickory swatters! Nothing beats a swatter for crushing a skull." Dean walked over, drawn by a morbid fascination. "Swatter?" Dean asked. "It's a baseball bat. You use it to hit balls." The vendor, Mo Cronin, looked at Dean like he was the crazy one. "Balls? Don't be stupid. Baseball was a sport where teams would beat each other to death with swatters. The spectators would cheer for the blood. It was glorious." Dean stared at Sam. Sam stared at Dean. "That is entirely inaccurate," Dean said, his voice quiet. "It was a game with rules and hot dogs and beer." "Hot dogs? You mean cooked dogs? We got those too. But buy a swatter first." Dean shook his head, backing away. He looked sick. "I hate this timeline. I hate it so much. They ruined baseball, Sam." Piper caught up to them, sliding a notebook into her coat pocket. "Hey, thanks for the assist back there. Name's Piper, Public Occurrences. That's my paper." "Sam, this is Dean. So, what brings two heavy hitters to the Jewel? You don't look like traders. You walk like soldiers, but you dress like, well, like you're from a museum." "We're looking for information," Dean said, scanning the crowd. Weird energy spikes, blue lightning, sky tearing open. Piper's expression shifted. The playfulness vanished, replaced by a guarded intensity. "Blue lightning? You mean the Institute?" "Institute?" "The boogeymen of the Commonwealth. Kidnappers, body snatchers. They use teleportation. Blue flash and poof, someone's gone. Replaced by a synth." "A synth?" Dean asked. "Synthetic human. Robots that look like us. Talk like us. But they aren't us." Dean's hand drifted to his 1911. "Shapeshifters. Great. Just great." "If you're looking for weird science, you need a detective," Piper said, pointing down a narrow alleyway in the stands. A flickering neon sign buzzed in the gloom, a red heart and a magnifying glass. Valentine Detective Agency. And luckily for you, Diamond City has one. But he's eccentric. Eccentric is our middle name, Dean muttered. Down the alley. Tell him Piper sent you. And try not to stare. Dean looked at the sign. A detective agency in left field. Finally. Something that makes sense. The office was a shrine to a world that had burned 2 centuries ago. It smelled of stale tobacco, cheap bourbon, and the ozone tang of old electronics. Venetian blinds sliced the green light from the stadium outside into dusty ribbons that lay across the clutter of files and holotapes. Dean pushed the door open. The bell above it jingled, a cheerful, jarring sound in the gloom. Finally, Dean muttered, stepping onto the linoleum floor. Some class. Sam followed, ducking his head under the low frame. He scanned the room, eyes landing on the figure sitting behind the desk. The man was facing away from them, reading a file illuminated by a single flickering desk lamp. He wore a trench coat that had seen better decades and a fedora pulled low. Smoke curled up from a cigarette held in his right hand. "Hey!" Dean said, voice rough. "We're looking for Nick Valentine." The chair swiveled slowly. The leather creaked. "You found him." Nick leaned forward into the pool of light. Dean froze. His breath hitched in his throat. Sam took a sharp, involuntary step back. Nick was wearing a human's clothes. He had a human's voice, gravelly, tired, cynical. But his face, half of it was synthetic skin, cracked and peeling like old paint. The other half was exposed machinery, plastic muscle fibers, metal teeth, and a glowing yellow eye with a mechanical iris that whirred as it focused on them. Wires snaked down his neck where the skin had sloughed off. He was a machine. Dean drew his 1911 in a blur of motion. Click! The hammer pulled back loud in the small room. He aimed directly at the metal plating of Nick's skull. "Monster!" Nick didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just took a long, slow drag of his cigarette, the embers glowing bright orange against his gray synthetic lips. "Monster!" Nick exhaled a stream of blue smoke. "That's a new one. Usually it's toaster, rust bucket, or just abomination." "Dean." "Wait," Sam said, putting a hand on Dean's forearm, pushing it down slightly. "Sam, look at him. He's a Terminator." "I prefer synth, actually," Nick said, his voice calm, carrying the weight of 1,000 solved cases. "Prototype Generation 2, and if you're going to shoot me, aim for the processor behind the left eye. It's quicker, less messy." Sam stepped in front of Dean, blocking the shot. "We were told you could help us. We're not here to fight." Nick looked at Sam, then at the shaking gun in Dean's hand. He stubbed out his cigarette in an ashtray already overflowing with butts. The click-whir of his mechanical wrist rotating was distinct, the sound of a clock winding down. "You're not from around here, are you?" Nick stood up. Gears hummed softly under his coat. "Most folks in the Commonwealth shoot first and ask questions never." You hesitated. "Put the pea-shooter away, kid," Nick continued, walking to a filing cabinet. "If I wanted you dead, I would have let the security turrets outside turn you into Swiss cheese. Now, who are you? And why do you smell like brimstone and ozone?" Dean lowered the gun, but didn't holster it. His thumb stayed on the hammer. "If he blinks red, I'm scrapping him." Nick chuckled, a dry, mechanical sound. "Fair enough. Take a seat. Let's talk about this blue lightning Piper was screaming about outside." Nick pulled a bottle of amber liquid and 2 dirty glasses from a drawer. "Drink? It's not pre-war, but it'll strip the paint off a vertibird." Dean eyed the bottle. "What is it?" "Bobrov's best moonshine, made from fermented mute fruit and, well, let's not dwell on the rest." Dean sighed, the tension in his shoulders dropping an inch. He walked over and took a glass. "Hit me." Nick poured. The liquid was thick, syrupy. Dean took a sip and coughed, eyes watering. "Oh, God," Dean wheezed, wiping his mouth. "That tastes like kerosene and regret." "Acquired taste," Nick grinned, the metal side of his face remaining static while the human side smiled. "Now, about this hole in the sky. You said your car stalled when you hit the ground?" "Yeah," Sam said, leaning against the desk. "The electronics fried, but not like an EMP. It felt heavy, like the air was pressing down on the engine." "Heavy air, static charge, and blue lightning?" Nick mused, walking to a bulky terminal on his desk. The screen glowed with radioactive green text. He started typing, his metal fingers clicking loudly on the keys like hail on a tin roof. "There have been reports. Scavengers near the glowing sea mentioning weird storms. Not radiation storms, energy storms." "The glowing sea?" Sam asked. "Ground Zero, where the bomb fell in 77. It's a radioactive hellhole. Nothing survives there except the worst of the worst. But lately," Nick tapped the screen. A map of the Commonwealth appeared, a jagged green line. A red marker blinked in the southwest corner. "The Brotherhood of Steel has been sending patrols down there. Heavy ones, power armor, vertibirds. They're looking for something." "Brotherhood of Steel?" Dean asked. "Who are they? The local Boy Scouts?" "Hardly," Nick snorted. "They're a paramilitary order, horde technology, hate mutants, hate synths. Basically, if it isn't human and holding a laser rifle, they want it dead or dismantled." Dean glanced at Nick's exposed wiring. "So they don't like you. They tolerate me because I solve problems they can't. But if I walked into their base without an invite, they'd scrap me for parts. If they're investigating energy spikes, maybe they found a way to track the rift," Sam suggested. "Maybe. Or maybe they caused it. The Brotherhood loves playing with toys they don't understand." Dean finished his drink and slammed the glass down. "Okay, so we need to find these Brotherhood mooks. Ask them nicely if they broke the sky." "Asking nicely won't work with Paladin Dance," Nick warned. "He's the local commander, rigid, by the book. He's camped out at the Cambridge police station." "Police station? Fortified. If you want answers, you will have to get past his guards. Or," Nick looked at Dean, then at Sam, "you could do what you do best." "What's that?" "Look like trouble." Nick grabbed his trench coat from the rack and threw it on. He checked a snub-nosed .44 revolver, spinning the cylinder with a metallic rasp, and slid it into a holster. "I've got a contact near Cambridge, a ghoul, knows the Brotherhood's patrol routes. We go talk to him." "A ghoul?" Dean looked skeptical. "You mean a zombie?" "Not all ghouls go feral, Dean," Nick said sharply. "Some just look like melted candles, but have sharper minds than you or me." "Where are we going?" Sam asked. "Good Neighbor," Nick said, opening the door. "It's the place where the people who don't fit in Diamond City go. Misfits, drifters, monsters." Dean smirked, checking his ammo. "Sounds like our kind of dive bar." "Then let's go, but keep your guns holstered unless I say otherwise. Good Neighbor has its own laws, and breaking them usually involves a knife in the ribs." The financial district was a canyon of shattered glass and crumbling brick. Skyscrapers leaned against each other like drunks, their skeletal frames silhouetted against the bruised sky. The fog here was thicker, yellow, and clinging to the ground like dry ice, swirling around their boots. Nick Valentine took point, his trench coat billowing in the radioactive wind. Dean and Sam flanked him, weapons drawn. Dogmeat trotted silently between them, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Overhead, the dull thrum-thrum-thrum of a Brotherhood vertibird echoed off the buildings, sweeping a spotlight across the ruins. "They're loud," Dean muttered, glaring at the sky. "You'd think for a secret society they'd invest in mufflers." "The Brotherhood doesn't do secret anymore," Nick said over his shoulder. They do shock and awe. They want you to know they're watching. Readings are spiking again, Sam said, checking his Geiger counter. We must be close to a hotspot. We're passing mass fusion, Nick explained. Leak's been plugged for years, but the ground still remembers. Keep moving. Ghouls like the warmth. Screech. It wasn't a scream. It was a wet, gargling shriek that sounded like a man drowning in gravel. Dogmeat barked, sharp, warning barks that echoed down the alley. From the shadows of a collapsed subway entrance, movement, fast, twitchy. "Dean, left!" Sam yelled. 3 figures burst out. They were humanoid, but emaciated. Skin hung off them in strips, revealing raw muscle and bone. Their eyes were black pits, devoid of humanity. They ran on all fours like animals, then sprang up, flailing. Feral ghouls. "Zombies! Fast zombies! I hate fast zombies!" Dean raised his sword off. Boom! The buckshot caught the lead ghoul in the chest. It flew back, hitting a rusted mailbox with a wet crunch. But it didn't stay down. It scrambled back up, hissing, missing half a rib cage. "What the hell?" Dean racked the slide. "Headshots, kid! Sever the brainstem!" Nick yelled, raising his pipe revolver. He fired calmly. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. 2 ghouls dropped, skulls shattered like porcelain. A third ghoul lunged at Sam. Sam sidestepped, grabbing the ghoul's arm to throw it. The skin sloughed off in his hand like wet paper. "Gross!" Sam grimaced, shaking the flesh from his glove. He pistol-whipped the ghoul, knocking it down, then fired 2 rounds into the back of its head. It went still. Silence returned, save for the vertebrate in the distance and the dry, rustling sound of the wind blowing trash down the street. Dean wiped slime off his jacket. "Okay, note to self, they're squishy." "Those were just roamers," Nick said, reloading. "If a reaver shows up, you'll want something bigger than that scattergun." Suddenly, a figure shuffles out from behind a dumpster. A man in tattered clothes, skin peeling, looking horrific. Dean spun, leveling the shotgun. "Another one!" "Wait!" Nick held up a hand. "He's a monster!" The figure stopped. It raised shaky hands. Its eyes weren't black pits. They were terrified, milky white orbs. "Don't shoot!" the drifter wheezed. "I ain't feral. I'm just looking for a shoe." Dean froze. He looked at the monster. It had fear in its eyes. Intelligence. "It talks?" Dean lowered the gun slowly. "Get to good neighbor, Mac," Nick told the drifter. "Streets aren't safe tonight." "Thanks, Valentine. You're a good synth." The drifter scurried away into the fog. Dean stared after him, conflicted. He rubbed his face, feeling the grit of the wasteland. "Sam, that thing was people." "Yeah," Sam said softly. "I need a beer." They reached a dead-end alley blocked by a heavy blue door illuminated by neon signs. Memory Den, Hotel Rexford, and a hand-painted sign, Good Neighbor, of the people, for the people. A bodyguard stood outside. He was wearing a tuxedo and sunglasses, holding a submachine gun. He looked like a bouncer for the end of the world. "Hold it," the bodyguard grunted. "Entrance fee. Or insurance. Take your pick." "Ease up, Ham," Nick said, stepping into the light. "They're with me." The bodyguard lowered his shades. "Nick, haven't seen you since the mayor threw that party, the one with the exploding Brahmin. Hard to forget. These are consultants. Out of town." The bodyguard eyed Dean and Sam. "They look clean. Too clean. You boys got caps?" Dean patted his pocket, hearing the jingle of the bottle caps he'd scavenged. "Enough to buy a drink." The bodyguard grinned. "Then welcome home. Try the third rail. Don't stab anyone unless they stab you first." The heavy door swung open, revealing the smoky, neon-lit heart of the slum. The balcony of the old state house overlooked the slums like a pulpit. Inside, the air was thick, stagnant, and sweet with a chemical tang that coated the back of Dean's throat. It smelled like burning plastic and peppermint, a jagged artificial scent that made his sinuses throb. Nick pushed the heavy wooden doors open. The room was a collision of centuries. An American flag, stained with soot and time, hung crookedly on the peeling plaster. A pristine oil portrait of the original John Hancock was stabbed through the throat with a combat knife, pinning a grocery list to the canvas. Sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, boots up on the polished wood, was the mayor. "Nick!" The voice was like grinding stones. Hancock spun a rusted revolver on one finger, the metal rasping against his knuckles. He wore a red Revolutionary War frock coat, gold braid fraying at the shoulders, and a tricorn hat tipped low. "My favorite synth. You bring me a present, or just bad news?" "A bit of both, John," Nick said, stepping onto the Persian rug. "Meet the Winchesters." Hancock stopped spinning the gun. He leaned forward, boots thumping onto the floor. Up close, the biology of the man was a horror show. He had no nose, just two dark slits in the center of a face that looked like melted candle wax. His skin was rough, cratered, and peeling in gray flakes. His eyes were solid black orbs, sunken deep into the skull, glittering with a manic, drug-fueled intelligence. He sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. "Winchesters," Hancock mused. "Sounds like a rifle brand. You two smelled different, like ozone and cheap motel soap." Dean shifted his weight, his hand brushing the grip of his 1911. "It's a distinct blend." Hancock laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound, like dry leaves crunching underfoot. "I like him," Hancock grinned, exposing gumless teeth. "He's got edge." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a red plastic canister. He put it to his mouth and inhaled sharply. Hiss. His black eyes dilated instantly. He held the breath, shuddering as the chemicals hit his bloodstream, then exhaled a cloud of acrid vapor. "Whew!" Hancock slumped back, muscles relaxing. "That's the stuff. Jet. Clears the sinuses. If I had sinuses." Dean watched, horrified and fascinated. "Did you just huff asthma medicine?" "Honey, this ain't medicine," Hancock rasped, tapping the canister against the desk. "It's clarity in a can. Slows the world down so you can enjoy the ride." Sam stepped forward, blocking Dean's view. "We're good. Thanks. We're here for information. Nick said you know what the Brotherhood is looking for." Hancock's smile vanished. The drug-induced haze sharpened into cold, predatory focus. He picked up a combat knife and began cleaning his fingernails. "The tin cans. Yeah. My scouts say a squad went down into Vault 114, Nick's old stomping grounds, and dragged something out. A box, lead-lined, humming like a fusion core on overdrive." Dean glanced at Sam. "The rift energy? Could be, if they contained it. Here's the thing," Hancock continued, pointing the knife at Sam. "The Brotherhood doesn't share. If they found a toy, they took it back to the blimp or their ground base at the Cambridge police station." "Police station. Nick mentioned that. It's a fortress. Paladin Dance runs it. Guy has a stick so far up his ass, he could sweep the floor while he walks. You go there, you get shot." "We've handled worse than tin soldiers," Dean said, voice flat. "Have you?" Hancock stood up. He walked around the desk, the tails of his coat swishing. He stopped inches from Dean. The smell of the ghoul, dry rot, and old spice was overpowering. "You look at me and you see a monster, don't you?" Hancock whispered. Dean held his gaze. He didn't flinch. "I see a guy who needs a better dermatologist. But I've met worse. Hell, I'm related to worse." Hancock stared at him, the black pits of his eyes searching for a lie. Then he threw his head back and laughed again, slapping Dean's shoulder with a hand that felt like sandpaper. "Ha! Dermatologist! I like this guy. He's got stones." Hancock walked to a safe in the corner, obscured by a pile of pre-war money. He spun the dial. Click, click, click. "Tell you what, you want into the police station. You can't knock, but you can offer a trade." He pulled out a holotape. It was a bulky yellow cassette. "This is a Brotherhood frequency code. Stole it off a dead knight in the fens. It'll get you on their comms. Tell them you have intel on the Institute. It might buy you 5 minutes before they open fire." He tossed the tape. Sam caught it. "Always a pleasure, John," Nick said, tipping his fedora. "Hey, leather jacket!" Hancock called out as Dean turned to leave. "If you get bored of the Boy Scout routine, come back. We can do some mentats and shoot bottle rockets at the super mutants." Dean smirked, despite himself. "I'll keep it in mind." The route to Cambridge took them past the Boston Common. In the old world, it would have been a park. Now it was a graveyard of trees, their blackened branches clawing at the smog. The fog was thick here, curling around the wrought iron fences like white smoke. It muffled sound, turning their footsteps into soft scuffs against the pavement. "Step lightly here," Nick warned, his voice barely a whisper. He pointed to the massive, stagnant pond in the center of the park. The water was covered in a thick green scum. A swan boat, a rusted plastic relic, floated innocently in the center. "This is Swan's territory." "Swan," Dean whispered, eyeing the plastic bird. "Like the bird?" "Like the nightmare." Boom. The ground jumped. Not a vibration, a jump. Dean grabbed the railing of a gazebo to steady himself. The water in the pond rippled, sending waves of muck slapping against the concrete shore. "Dean," Sam hissed, staring at the Geiger counter. "Huge radiation spike, dead ahead." "From the pond?" Suddenly, the fog swirled violently. A car, a rusted compact hatchback, flew out of the gloom. It sailed over their heads with a whooshing sound and smashed into the brick facade of a building behind them, raining glass and masonry onto the street. "Ducking!" Dean yelled, covering his head. "Did someone just throw a Honda at us?" Roar. The pond exploded. Rising from the murky depths was a mountain. It was a super mutant, but on a scale that defied biology, 20 feet tall. Its skin was a mottled tapestry of green and gray tumors. It wore a harness made of flattened shopping carts and car doors woven together with rebar. In its right hand, it dragged a massive club, a concrete fire hydrant attached to a telephone pole. The behemoth. "Okay," Dean said, his jaw actually dropping. "I take it back. That is the biggest thing I have ever seen." "It's a behemoth! Run!" Sam yelled. The giant charged. It didn't run. It earthquaked. Thud. 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 Each step cracked the pavement, sending shockwaves through the soles of Dean's boots. "Swan! Smash!" The creature swung the telephone pole. "Scatter!" Nick yelled. They dove. The pole smashed into the ground where they had been standing a second ago. Asphalt exploded into shrapnel. A piece of road debris clipped Dean's shoulder, spinning him around. Dean rolled, coming up with his shotgun. He fired both barrels at the giant's knee, the only part not covered by a car door. Boom! The buckshot hit the thick hide. It was like shooting a brick wall with a spitball. The pellets barely broke the skin. "It didn't even notice," Dean scrambled back, swapping to his 1911. The behemoth turned its gaze to Dean. It raised a massive foot, wide as a dining table, to stomp him flat. "Sam, Mojo, anything." "I'm out of heavy ammo." Sam fired his Taurus uselessly at the creature's chest. Suddenly, a high-pitched whistle cut through the roar of the monster. Blam! A massive impact hit the behemoth's shoulder. Blood and green ichor exploded in a mist. The giant roared in pain, stumbling back, the foot missing Dean by inches. "What the hell was that?" Dean gasped, scrambling away on his elbows. On a rooftop overlooking the park, a silhouette stood against the yellow moon. A cowboy hat, a long duster coat flapping in the radioactive wind. A massive custom lever-action rifle rested on the ledge. The ghoul. He racked the lever of his gun. Clack, clack. "Hey, smooth skins!" The voice was dry, mocking, and amplified by the echo of the ruins. "You're dancing with the wrong girl!" Cooper Howard jumped. He dropped 20 feet, his coat billowing like black wings, and landed with a heavy thud on top of a rusted bus. He raised his hand cannon, the MTS-255. "Move your ass, cowboy, unless you want to be a pancake!" Dean scrambled clear as the behemoth brought the club down again, crushing the bus roof where Cooper had just been standing. Cooper was already moving, sliding down the windshield. Cooper fired again, blam. A slug round the size of a thumb hit the behemoth in the left eye. The giant screamed, clutching its face. It dropped the club, the earth shaking as the concrete hydrant impacted. "It's blinded!" Nick yelled, spotting the tactical advantage. "Hit the legs!" Sam spotted a cluster of fragmentation mines strapped to the corpse of a raider near the gazebo. He sprinted, grabbed them. "Dean, catch!" Sam tossed a mine like a frisbee. "Frisbee? Really?" Dean caught it. He twisted the arming cap. Beep, beep, beep. "Hey, Jolly Green Giant!" Dean ran toward the behemoth. He slid on the slick, mossy pavement, going right between the giant's tree trunk legs. As he slid, he slammed the magnetic mine onto the behemoth's ankle. Dean scrambled up on the other side and then sprinted. "Fire in the hole!" Kaboom! The mine detonated. It blew the behemoth's foot apart, shattering bone and meat. The giant toppled like a felled oak tree. Crash! The ground shook as 20 tons of mutant hit the pavement. A wave of stagnant pond water washed over the street. The creature groaned, trying to rise on its ruined leg. Cooper walked up to the fallen giant. He spun his revolver, a blur of steel. He put the barrel against the behemoth's temple. "Good night, Swan." Blam. The behemoth went still. Silence. Dean panted, hands on his knees, staring at the dead monster. He looked at the ghoul standing on top of the corpse. Cooper looked like a dried-out piece of leather left in the sun for 2 centuries. Nose missing, skin red and raw, but he moved with a terrifying, fluid grace. "Who is that?" Dean wheezed. Cooper hopped down. He holstered his gun. "Name's Cooper," the ghoul rasped. "And you boys are making a hell of a lot of noise for tourists." "Cooper," Nick nodded, stepping out of the shadows. "Didn't know you were in town." "Nick, still playing detective?" Cooper spat a stream of dark tobacco juice onto the pavement. "I saw the explosion, figured there might be loot. Instead, I find 2 soft hands trying to tickle a behemoth with a scattergun." Dean straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Soft hands? I just blew its foot off." Cooper grinned. It was a terrifying sight, yellow teeth in a skull face. "After I blinded it." "You're welcome." Sam walked up, wary. "Thanks for the assist." "Don't thank me yet," Cooper said, eyeing Dean's 1911. "I charge for ammo. Now. I hear you're looking for the Brotherhood." "Word travels fast," Dean muttered. "In this town, secrets rot faster than bodies. I'm heading that way. Heard Dance has a new toy. Figure I'll tag along, see if it's worth stealing." "Great," Dean looked at Sam. "Another monster." Cooper's head snapped toward Dean. His hand hovered over his gun. "The world's full of monsters, kid. The trick is being the one with the biggest gun." Cooper turned and started walking north, spurs jingling softly. "Let's go, before Swan's girlfriend shows up." Dean froze. "He has a girlfriend?" Cambridge was a graveyard of higher learning. The skeletons of scholars lay huddled in the gutters, clutching rot-resistant diplomas, while feral dogs gnawed on their tibias. The streets here were choked with the debris of a panic that had happened 2 centuries ago. Overturned buses, military checkpoints abandoned in hours, and statues of patriots draped in radioactive moss. The group moved in a loose, predatory formation. Nick Valentine took point, his trench coat snapping in the wind. The ghoul, Cooper Howard, walked in the rear, his spurs jingling with a soft, rhythmic chink-chink that sounded like coins dropping on a tombstone. Cooper lit a hand-rolled cigarette, the match flaring against his skull-like features. He inhaled, the smoke curling out through the hole where his nose used to be. "So Kansas," Cooper rasped, exhaling a cloud that smelled of harsh tobacco and dried leaves. "That's a long walk. You boys fly in on a vertibird, or did you just click your heels together?" "We drove," Dean said, not looking back. His eyes were scanning the rooftops, paranoid. 67 Chevy Impala, 4 doors, 327 V8. Cooper laughed, a dry, wheezing sound that rattled in his chest. "A car? On these roads? You're lying, or you're stupid. She flies when she needs to, and right now she's sitting back there waiting for a fuel pump." Cooper walked faster, his long stride eating up the pavement until he was beside Dean. He eyed the nickel-plated 1911 in Dean's hand. "Pretty piece," Cooper noted, his voice sounding like sandpaper on wood. 1911, pre-war, good stopping power, but low capacity." Dean patted the gun. 7 rounds is all I need. If I can't kill it in 7, I'm doing it wrong." Cooper tapped the massive custom revolver on his hip. The barrel was long, scarred, and looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. 7? Cute. This here is a customized MTS 255. Takes .45 to 70 rounds, or shotgun shells. Depends on how messy I want the room to be. "Compensating for something, Tex?" Dean smirked. Cooper grinned, exposing yellow recessed teeth. Just the lack of good company. "Guys," Sam hissed from the front. He was staring at the Geiger counter, but his eyes were fixed on the needle swinging wildly. "Cut the chatter. The readings are spiking again, but it's not just radiation, it's broadcasting." Nick stopped. He tilted his head, the metal panels on his neck shifting. "Broadcasting?" "It's a signal," Sam said, tapping the glass face of the meter. "Repeating, ad victoriam, preservation of technology, unauthorized access restricted." "That's the police station," Nick said, pointing a metal finger down the street. "Dance has a transmitter set up on the roof. They use it to coordinate the patrols." They rounded the corner, and the world changed from dark ruin to blinding light. The Cambridge police station was a fortress. Sandbags were piled 6 feet high around the entrance. A high chain-link fence topped with gleaming razor wire perimetered the lot. But it was the light that hurt. Massive military spotlights cut through the gloom, turning the fog into a solid white wall. Standing on the roof of the station entrance, silhouetted against the glare, was a giant. He was encased in steel. T-60 power armor. It made him look less like a man and more like a walking tank. The hydraulic servos whined with a high-pitched whee as he shifted his weight. Paladin dance. He leveled a laser rifle at them. The weapon hummed with a menacing, pent-up energy. "Halt!" The voice was amplified by the helmet's external speakers, loud, metallic, and devoid of warmth. "Unknown contacts, you are entering a restricted military zone. Identify yourselves or be neutralized." 2 other soldiers, Brotherhood Knights, appeared in the windows, the barrels of their rifles glinting in the spotlight. Dean whistled low. "Okay, I gotta admit, the suit is cool. It's like Iron Man joined the Marines." Cooper spat on the pavement. "It's a coffin with legs. Wait until the fusion core overheats. Cooks you like a pot roast. I repeat, identify." Sam stepped forward, hands raised, palms open. "We're travelers. We have intel on the Institute. The Brotherhood does not trade with scavengers. Turn back." Dean stepped up next to Sam, bristling. "Hey, Tin Man, we're not scavengers. We're the guys who blew up the behemoth back at the pond. You're welcome, by the way." Dance paused. The helmet turned slightly, the servos whining again. "You claim responsibility for the seismic event in the Common?" "Claim it," Cooper yelled up, thumbing his hat back. "I signed it. Now open the gate, Dance, unless you want to explain to your elder why you turned away the only people who know what that rock in your basement actually does." Dance stiffened. The rifle lowered an inch. The spotlight seemed to intensify, burning Dean's retinas. "How do you know about the artifact?" "Because it's ours," Sam said, his voice carrying over the wind. Silence stretched. The wind howled through the ruins, rattling the razor wire. "Knight Reese, open the gate, weapons hot. If they make a move, execute them." The heavy steel gates groaned, the motors protesting as they slid open on rusted tracks. "Friendly guy," Dean muttered, holstering his gun but keeping his hand on the grip. "He's a peach," Cooper grinned. "Just don't ask him to dance. He steps on toes." The interior of the station was a shock of order in a world of chaos. The air was scrubbed clean, smelling of machine oil, floor wax, and the distinct ozone tang of high-voltage electronics. Generators hummed a steady bass note that vibrated in the soles of their boots. Knight Reese stood by the armory cage, nursing a bandaged arm. He was unarmored, wearing a tight olive-drab flight suit. His face was a map of hostility. His eyes locked onto Nick and Cooper instantly. "You brought them inside the perimeter," Reese spat, the saliva hitting the polished floor. "Paladin, this is a violation of protocol. A synth and a ghoul." Dance stepped down from the catwalk. The floor shook with each step. Thud hiss, thud hiss. He reached up and twisted the seals on his helmet. With a hiss of depressurization, he pulled it off. His face was square, jawline rigid, hair cut in a severe military fade. His eyes were hard, tired, and utterly lacking in humor. "Protocol is noted, Knight," Dance said, his voice human now, but no less commanding. "Secure the entrance." Reese stepped into Cooper's path. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, but Cooper looked at him like he was a minor inconvenience, a fly to be swatted. "One wrong move, ghoul, and I put a round in your head," Reese snarled. Cooper leaned in. The smell of decay wafting off him was potent in the clean room. He whispered, "Son, I've got boots older than your entire ideology. Step aside before I make you part of the floorboards." Reese bristled, hand going to his laser rifle. "Hey, G.I. Joe!" Dean stepped between them, chest to chest with Reese. "Cool it, we're guests." "You're scavengers," Reese sneered. "And you're a glorious pain in the ass. Now move." "Enough!" Dance's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Scribe Halen, report!" Scribe Halen looked up from a field terminal. She was younger, softer-edged than the others, wearing the orange jumpsuit of a Brotherhood scribe. Her face was pale, illuminated by the green glow of the monitor. "Paladin," she said, her voice trembling, "the transmitter is stable, but the energy readings from the courtyard, they're still spiking." She pointed a handheld scanner at Sam. It trilled wildly, a frantic rising pitch. "It's coming from them." Dance turned slowly to face Sam and Dean. The T-60 armor made him a statue come to life. "Explain," Dance demanded. "You are not carrying fusion cores. You are not carrying plasma weaponry. Why do you radiate the same signature as the artifact?" "Because we came through the rift it created," Sam said, holding his ground. "Look, Space Ranger!" Dean snapped, patience evaporating. "We scratched your back. Now scratch ours. What's in the box?" Dance considered them. He looked at Nick, a synth he was programmed to destroy. He looked at Cooper, A mutant he was sworn to cleanse, and the Winchesters, anomalies. "Bring it out," Dance ordered. "Sir?" Halen hesitated. "Protocol dictates. The artifact is unstable. If these men are connected to it, I want to know why. Bring it." Halen nodded. She walked to a heavy lead-lined safe in the corner. She spun the heavy iron wheel. Clank! Clank! The door swung open with a groan of heavy hinges. She pulled out a container. It was a standard pre-war footlocker, but reinforced with thick lead plating and warning stickers that had faded with time. She set it on the metal table in the center of the room. "We recovered this from the Overseer's office in Vault 114, Halen said, unlatching the heavy clamps. "It was emitting a signal that jammed our vertibird navigation." She threw the lid back. Glow. It wasn't light. It was a physical force. A piercing bluish-white radiance flooded the room, bleaching the color out of the walls, the armor, the faces. It cast no shadows, only absolute blinding illumination. And the sound. It wasn't a hum. It was a scream. A high-pitched harmonic ringing that felt like a drill boring into the base of Dean's skull. It was the sound of a dog whistle for the soul. Dean grabbed his head, stumbling back. "Turn it off!" he yelled, his voice sounding distant over the ringing. Sam winced, squeezing his eyes shut. Hands clapped over his ears. "It's grace! Pure, concentrated grace!" Inside the box lay a crystal. It was jagged, asymmetrical, pulsing with a heartbeat that synced with the throbbing in Dean's temples. It looked like a shard of frozen lightning trapped in glass. "What in the hell is that?" Nick shielded his optical sensors, his mechanical eye shuttering rapidly to adjust to the brightness. "My sensors are frying!" "That ain't radiation," Cooper muttered, stepping back into the shadow of a locker. "That's wrong. It feels cold." Sam reached out. His hand trembled, the hairs on his arm standing up. "It's a shard of the rift, crystallized angel energy. It's what brought us here." "It's our ticket home," Dean realized, squinting through the pane. Dean reached for the box. Clang. Dance's armored hand slammed down on the table, blocking Dean. The metal gauntlet dented the steel surface. "Do not touch it." "It belongs to us," Dean growled. "This object is a weapon of unknown origin," Dance said coldly. "Under the Codex of the Brotherhood of Steel, it is to be confiscated and studied." "Confiscated?" Dean's voice dropped an octave. "Buddy, that's my ride home you're trying to steal. It is too dangerous for civilians." "I am not a civilian." Dean's hand hovered near his 1911. Dance's hand hovered near the laser rifle maglocked to his thigh. Reese raised his weapon. Cooper raised his hand cannon. Nick sighed, the servo in his neck whirring as he reached for his revolver. It was a Mexican standoff in a police station, bathed in holy light. "Now this," Cooper grinned, "this is a party." "Wait," Sam yelled, desperate. "Dance, listen. That crystal. If it becomes unstable, it won't just irradiate you. It will vaporize this entire city. It's not nuclear. It's cosmic." "Sir." Halen was looking at her scanner, face pale. He might be right. The energy output is increasing exponentially just by being open. It's reacting to them. Dance looked at the crystal pulsing violently, then at Sam. "If it is reacting to you, then you are a threat." Suddenly the station lights flickered. The heavy generators groaned and died. The only light came from the crystal. The ground shook. "Alarm klaxon!" Whoop! 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 The red emergency lights began to rotate, casting blood-colored shadows across the room. "Report!" Dance barked. Halen typed frantically. "Perimeter breach! Massive energy signature incoming!" "More ghouls!" Reese shouted. "No, it's coming from the sky. Teleportation signature. The Institute." Nick drew his gun, the yellow eye glowing in the dark. "They tracked the signal." Boom. The front doors were blown inward. Smoke and blue static filled the room. The front of the station didn't just explode, it dissolved. The heavy steel doors buckled inward, turning molten orange at the edges before flying across the room like shrapnel. Smoke, thick and white, billowed in. It tasted of sulfur and pulverized drywall. "Defensive positions," Dance's voice boomed, the external speakers of his helmet cracking with feedback. "Engage!" Dance flipped the heavy metal table with one hand, sending the lead box skidding across the linoleum. He dropped to one knee behind the makeshift barricade, the servers of his T-60 armor whining in protest. Zap, crack. The air in the center of the room tore open. It wasn't a portal. It was a violation of physics, a jagged blue scar that screamed as it forced matter into existence. Synths. They relayed in with a sound like tearing canvas. First, the Gen 1s. Skeletal, yellowed plastic frames that looked like anatomical models, stripped of flesh. Their hydraulics hissed as they raised Institute laser rifles. Peebo, peepee, pee. The room filled with red light. Beams of coherent energy slashed through the smoke, scorching the walls black. The smell of ozone, sharp, metallic, like a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle, was overpowering. "Robots!" Dean yelled, ducking behind a filing cabinet as a laser beam sliced the top drawer off, sending paperwork fluttering down like snow. "Why is it always robots?" "Aim for the limbs," Sam shouted, firing his Taurus. "They're fragile." Sam's bullet took a Gen 1 in the knee joint. The plastic shattered. The synth collapsed, but it didn't scream. It just kept firing from the floor. Its programming relentless. Nick Valentine stood in the open, firing his pipe revolver with calm, mechanical precision. Bang! Bang! 2 shots, 2 sensors destroyed. "Watch the head," Nick warned. "The optical sensors are shielded." One synth charged Reese. The knight was pinned, firing wildly, his leg dragging. "Get back! Abomination!" Reese screamed. The synth grabbed the barrel of Reese's laser rifle. With a sound of grinding gears, it bent the steel barrel 90 degrees. It raised a plastic fist to crush Reese's skull. Cooper Howard didn't fire. He moved like a shadow in the strobe light chaos. He swung his massive custom rifle like a baseball bat. Crack! The walnut stock connected with the synth's neck. Plastic shattered. Wires sparked blue. The robot dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Cooper looked down at Reese, spitting a stream of tobacco juice that sizzled on the hot barrel of the ruined rifle. "You're welcome, sunshine." "Is that it?" Dean yelled, reloading. "Just the skeletons?" "No," Nick said, his yellow eyes narrowing. "That's the infantry. The heavy hitter is coming." Shimmer. The air in the center of the room didn't tear this time. It rippled. Like heat haze on a highway, the space distorted, bending the light around a humanoid shape. "Dean! Invisible!" Sam pointed. Dean swung his sawed-off shotgun blindly at the empty air. Clang! The barrel didn't hit air. It hit something solid. A hand materialized, pale, human-looking, gripping the shotgun barrel. The shimmer faded, revealing a man in a black trench coat and dark sunglasses. His face was a blank slate of indifference. A Corsa, X, 6-8, 8. "Anomaly detected," the Corsa said. His voice was a flat monotone, terrifyingly calm amidst the gunfire. "Surrender the artifact." Dean tried to pull the gun back. The Corsa's grip was absolute. "Let go, Matrix!" The Corsa twisted his wrist. Steel shrieked. He ripped the shotgun from Dean's hands and tossed it aside like a toy. In the same motion, he backhanded Dean. Thwack! The blow lifted Dean off his feet. He flew backward, smashing into a metal desk, breath exploding from his lungs. "Focus fire on the Corsa!" Dance roared. Dance opened up with his laser rifle. Red beams slammed into the Corsa's coat. Sparks! The fabric absorbed the energy, dissipating it in ripples of blue static, armored weave. The courser drew a sleek angular pistol. He didn't aim, he calculated. One shot hit Dance in the chest plate, staggering the massive suit. Another hit Reese in the thigh. "My leg!" Reese screamed, clutching the cauterized wound. "Dean!" Sam sprinted to his brother, sliding on the debris-littered floor. "You okay?" Dean groaned, rolling onto his side. He spat a mouthful of blood. "He hits harder than a demon!" The courser walked toward the lead box. He moved with an eerie, gliding grace, stepping over the twitching bodies of the Gen 1s. He stooped to pick up the crystal. Not today, smooth skin. Cooper leveled his hand cannon. Blam! The slug round hit the courser in the shoulder. The impact spun him around, tearing the coat. But there was no blood, just a spray of white synthetic fluid and the spark of severed circuitry. The courser looked at the wound. Threat assessment, moderate. He raised his pistol at Cooper. "Hey, robot cop!" Dean was standing. He was swaying, blood dripping from his chin, but he was grinning. In his hand, he held a grenade, a round pulsing disc he'd swiped from the Brotherhood armory table. "Catch!" Dean pulled the pin with his teeth and threw it. The courser turned. His internal processor calculated the trajectory, the velocity, the arc. He reached out to catch it, to throw it back. "Boom," Dean whispered. ZZZZT-crack. The pulse grenade detonated before it touched the courser's hand. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was a scream of dying electronics. A massive blue EMP wave washed over the room, shattering the lights, killing the terminals, and frying every circuit in its path. The courser convulsed. It was a digital seizure. His cloak flickered from black to static. His sunglasses shattered inward. He fell to one knee, twitching, smoke pouring from his ears. "Target is stunned," Dance shouted, his armor locking up for a second before the emergency servos kicked in. "Finish it!" Dance charged. The T-60 suit turned him into a battering ram. He slammed his armored fist into the courser's face. Crunch. Plastic, metal, and synthetic bone shattered. The courser's head snapped back at an unnatural angle. He collapsed, twitching once, then went still. Silence returned to the station. Smoke drifted from the ruined doorway, curling around the dead bodies of the machines. Dean panted, wiping blood from his lip with a shaking hand. "Okay," Dean wheezed, looking at the heap of black plastic and a trench coat. "Note to self, EMP grenades work." The aftermath smelled of burnt hair and ozone. Reese was groaning in the corner, Halen applying a stim pack to his leg with trembling hands. The hiss of the medicine injection was loud in the quiet room. Dance stood over the dead courser, removing his helmet. His face was grim, illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. Dean walked over to his shotgun. The barrel was bent at a 30-degree angle. He sighed tragically. "You fought well," Dance said, not looking up. "For a civilian." "I'm not a civilian," Dean snapped, holstering his 1911. "I'm a hunter, and you owe me a shotgun. That robot bent the barrel." "The Institute knows the artifact is here," Dance said, turning to face them. "They sent a courser, X6-88. That means they are desperate." Nick walked over, kicking the dead courser's boot with a metallic clank. "If they sent X6, they aren't just desperate. They're scared. They know what that crystal can do." Sam picked up the lead box. The metal was warm to the touch, vibrating softly. "And so do we. It's leaking grace. If we don't stabilize it, it's going to blow a hole in this city." Dance looked at the box. He looked at the ruined station. The walls were breached. His squad was wounded. "My orders are to secure dangerous technology," Dance stated, his voice regaining its command cadence. "We cannot defend this position. We must move the artifact to the Pridwin." The Pridwin? Dean asked. The big blimp? The mobile headquarters of the Brotherhood of Steel. Elder Maxon will decide its fate. No way, Dean stepped forward, crossing his arms. That's our ticket home. You take it up there, we never see it again. That is not a request, Dance said coldly. His hand drifted to the laser rifle on his thigh. You are in a military jurisdiction. The artifact is now Brotherhood property. Property? Dean laughed, a harsh sound. Buddy, that's my ride home you're trying to steal. It is too dangerous for civilians. Cooper leaned against a scorched wall, reloading his revolver one shell at a time. Click, click. You know, Dance, Cooper rasped. You're making a mistake. These boys know how to turn it off. You don't. Dance paused. He looked at the box. It was humming again, a low, dangerous vibration that rattled the teeth in his skull. He's right, Sam said, stepping up. That's angel energy. It doesn't run on fusion cores. It runs on soul stuff. If you try to plug it into your ship without us, you'll crash. You'll burn that Zeppelin right out of the sky. Dance weighed the options. Protocol versus survival. He looked at his wounded knight. He looked at the breached doors. Very well, Dance nodded once. You will accompany the artifact. Under guard. Under guard? Dean bristled. We just saved your squad. Standard procedure. I hate standard procedure, Dean muttered to Sam. Signal the vertibird, Dance ordered Halen. Priority Alpha extraction. Destination, the Pridwin. The transition from the ground to the air was violent. The vertibird, a gunship that looked like a dragonfly made of armor plating, descended into the courtyard, kicking up a blinding storm of dust and debris. The rotors screamed, a deafening thwup 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 that pounded against the chest. They piled into the open bay. It was cramped, smelling of hydraulic fluid, sweat, and unwashed fear. Dean sat on the metal bench, gripping the safety bar until his knuckles turned white. He hated flying. He hated planes. He especially hated planes that looked like they were welded together from scrap metal. Strap in, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. We're heavy, lifting in 3. The engines roared, the ground fell away. Dean squeezed his eyes shut. Hush, little baby, don't say a word, Never mind that noise you heard. Cooper sat opposite him, legs crossed, looking bored. He lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind whipping through the open doors. You gonna puke, cowboy? Cooper shouted over the rotors. Because if you do, aim out the door. This duster is dry clean only. Shut up, Dean yelled, opening one eye. I hate flying. It's unnatural. If God wanted us to fly, he wouldn't have given us muscle cars. Dean, Sam shouted, leaning out the door, the wind tearing at his hair. Look, you have to see this. Dean forced himself to look. Below them, the ruins of Boston stretched out like a graveyard of giants. The skyscrapers were jagged teeth, broken and blackened. The Charles River was a ribbon of sludge reflecting the moonlight. But it was the silence of the view that hit him. From up here, the monsters were small. The chaos was distant. It was just dead. To the southwest, the glowing green haze of the glowing sea dominated the horizon, a festering wound on the planet. Holy crap, Dean whispered, the fear of flying momentarily forgotten. The bomb didn't just hit the city, Sam said, his voice hollow. It erased everything. It's endless. Dance stood by the door, holding a strap, looking out at the devastation with a stoic expression. That is the result of mankind's hubris, Dance said, his voice amplified by his helmet. Technology without restraint. That is why the Brotherhood exists, to save humanity from itself. Nick sat in the shadows, collar turned up against the freezing wind. Save it or hoard it. You boys sit up in your balloon looking down on the ants, deciding who gets to play with the matches. Watch your tongues, Synth, Dance snapped. You are only alive because you are useful, for now." The vertibird banked hard, the G-force pressing them into the metal seats. Through the clouds, a shadow emerged, massive, imposing. The Prydwen. It hung in the sky like a steel leviathan. Searchlights swept the air around it. Other vertibirds docked and undocked like bees at a hive. It was a marvel of engineering and a terrifying symbol of power. "Okay," Dean said, swallowing hard. "That's big." "It's a mobile base of operations," Sam analyzed. "Hydrogen lift cells, fusion power plant." "It's a giant target," Dean countered. "One well-placed angel blade or a nuke. And it's the Hindenburg all over again." Cooper grinned, ash from his cigarette flying into the wind. "I like the way you think, kid." The vertibird slowed, hovering alongside the massive steel hull. The docking clamps extended with a metallic clang that shook the cabin. Dean jumped. "I hate the clunk. Why is there always a clunk?" The bay door slid open, revealing the flight deck of the airship. Rows of power armor suits stood silent vigil. They had arrived. The docking clamps engaged with a bone-jarring thunk that reverberated through the hull of the vertibird. The cabin lurched, metal groaning against metal, before settling into a stillness that felt heavier than the flight itself. The bay doors hissed open, revealing not the sky, but a cavern of riveted steel. Dean unbuckled his harness, his fingers fumbling with the latch. His stomach was currently doing gymnastics around his liver. He stumbled out onto the flight deck, boots ringing on the grated metal walkway. The air inside the Prydwen was different. It didn't smell like the Wasteland. It smelled of recycled oxygen, hydraulic fluid, and the sharp antiseptic tang of high-voltage capacitors. It was the smell of a machine that was alive. "Move!" A Brotherhood lancer in a bomber jacket shoved Dean forward. "Watch the leather, pal," Dean snapped, brushing his arm off. They were herded onto the main deck. It was a hive of activity. Squires ran fuel hoses, scribes calibrated laser turrets, knights in power armor marched in synchronized lockstep, the floor trembling with their combined weight. As Cooper Howard stepped off the bird, the atmosphere in the bay shifted instantly. It went from busy to hostile. "Abomination on the deck!" a night captain shouted, racking the slide of a combat shotgun. He wasn't the only one. 6 laser rifles snapped up, aiming directly at Cooper's scarred face and Nick's mechanical skull. The hum of capacitors charging filled the air, a high-pitched whine of impending violence. Cooper didn't flinch. He just took a drag of his cigarette, looking at the barrels pointed at his chest with mild amusement. "You boys need to relax," Cooper rasped, exhaling smoke. "Stress kills quicker than radiation." "Secure them," the captain ordered. "Get those things off my ship." "Stand down!" Paladin Dance stepped between the firing squad and the prisoners. He didn't raise his voice. He projected it. The command cut through the noise of the flight deck like a knife. "They are under my protection," Dance stated, staring down the captain. "Elder's orders, priority Alpha." The captain hesitated. He looked at the ghoul, then at the synth, disgust curling his lip. "Paladin, this is a violation of the Codex. We do not harbor mutants." "We do what the Elder commands, Captain, unless you wish to debate him." The threat hung in the air, heavy and cold. Slowly, the rifles lowered. The captain spat on the deck, inches from Cooper's boot. "Get them to the brig, before I forget my orders." Cooper looked at the spit. He looked at the captain. He tapped the handle of his hand cannon, but didn't draw. "Charming hospitality," Cooper muttered to Nick. "Reminds me of the pre-war country clubs. Less plaid, more fascism." "Walk," Dance ordered, nodding toward a heavy freight elevator at the far end of the bay. They were marched across the deck. Dean looked over the railing. Below, through the open bay doors, the Boston airport was a sprawling ruin of concrete and rusted airplanes. The Prydwen hovered above it all, a steel guard looking down on an ant hill. "If this thing goes down," Dean shouted over the noise of a venting steam pipe, "we're gonna be a very expensive crater." "The Prydwen is unsinkable," Dance said, pressing the call button for the elevator. Dean looked at the massive hydrogen gas cells lining the ceiling above them. "Yeah, they said that about the Titanic and the Death Star." The elevator cage arrived with a rattle of chains. They piled in. The gate slammed shut. As they ascended, the flight deck shrank away. The vibration of the main engines grew louder, vibrating in Dean's teeth. "You okay?" Sam asked, noting Dean's pale complexion. "I hate Zeppelins," Dean gripped the mesh wall. "I hate blimps. I hate anything that floats and can be popped with a needle." "It's armored plating, Dean." "It's a balloon, Sam. A giant metal balloon filled with explosive gas. It's a bad idea." The elevator jolted to a halt. The command deck was a cathedral of information. Banks of terminals lined the curved walls, their green monochrome screens flickering with data from across the Commonwealth. Scribes moved in hushed reverence, whispering coordinates and supply manifests. In the center of the room stood a massive holographic map table, projecting a shimmering, three-dimensional ghost of the city below. But the room was dominated by the man standing at the massive observation window. He wore a heavy fur-collared battle coat over intricate armored weave. His hands were clasped behind his back. He was staring out at the ruin of Boston with the stillness of a statue. Elder Arthur Maxson. Beside him, suspended in a hydraulic power armor frame that constituted the lower half of her body, was Proctor Ingram. She was working on a rig that held the lead box. "Elder," Dance announced, stepping onto the bridge. "The assets are secured." Maxson turned. He was young, perhaps in his 20s, but his face carried the weight of a man twice his age. A scar ran vertically down his right cheek, pulling his beard into a jagged line. His eyes were cold blue and fanatical. "Step forward," Maxson commanded. His voice was deep, resonating off the steel walls. Dance nudged Sam and Dean. They approached the map table. Ingram looked up from her data slate. Her face was smudged with grease, her eyes bright with intellectual hunger. "Elder," she said, tapping the lead box, "the readings are nonsensical. 0 radiation, 0 heat signature, but the energy output, it's off the scale. It's oscillating, like a heartbeat." "A heartbeat?" Maxson frowned. He walked to the table, his boots thudding heavily. "It's not singing," Sam said, stepping up to the rig. "It's screaming." Maxson turned his gaze to Sam. It felt like being scanned by a weapon. "Explain. You claim to know this object's nature. My scribes call it a quantum anomaly." "It ain't an anomaly, Coatrack," Dean cut in. Stepping between Sam and the elder, he squared his shoulders, matching Maxson's posture. "It's fact. Where we come from, that rock is what powers an archangel. It's pure creation energy, and right now, it's unstable." The guards bristled at the insult, hands tightening on their weapons. Maxson held up a hand to stay them. He looked Dean up and down, assessing the threat. "You speak of angels?" Maxson's voice dripped with disdain. "Superstition. The Brotherhood was founded on science, on the preservation of knowledge. We do not deal in fairy tales." "Science didn't make that crystal, Elder," Dean said, pointing a finger at the box. "And science can't control it." "If it is a weapon, we will control it," Maxson countered, his voice rising, echoing in the cavernous room. "The Institute cannot be allowed to possess this kind of power. They would use it to replace humanity, to play God." "Sam," Dean warned, "he's giving the speech." "It's not a weapon," Sam tried to reason. "It's a door to our world. We need it to go home." "A door?" Maxon laughed darkly. He gestured to the window, to the airport ruins below where a massive construction project was underway. Cranes were lifting giant steel limbs. Or a power source. Sam looked out the window. His eyes widened. No way. We are preparing a massive offensive, Maxon declared, staring at his reflection in the glass. Liberty Prime. Liberty who? Dean asked. Liberty Prime, Ingram chimed in, grinning as she patted the dashboard of her suit. Mark II. We pulled him out of the Potomac River in D.C., rebuilt him bolt by bolt. But his power coupling burned out. The fusion agitator can't handle the load of the eye laser and the nuke simultaneously. You want to use the Grace to power a giant robot? Sam asked, horrified. It is the only way to destroy the Institute, Maxon said, turning back to them. We need a power source that can breach their underground shields. Your crystal provides infinite output. Dean rubbed his face, the stubble rasping against his palm. Of course. Giant robot. Why is it always giant robots? Why can't it ever be a giant? I don't know. Sandwich? Maxon stepped closer to Dean. The air between them crackled with alpha aggression. You want to go home? Fine. Help Proctor Ingram stabilize this energy. Help us power Prime. We destroy the Institute. Then you can use the residuals to open your door. And if we say no? Dean asked, voice low. Maxon gestured to the open bay door to the 3,000-foot drop. Then you are of no use to the Brotherhood, and I do not carry dead weight. Dean looked at Sam. It was a bad deal. A deal with a warlord in a floating tin can. But they were trapped in the sky, surrounded by an army. Dean sighed, the fight draining out of his posture just enough to fake compliance. Fine, we fix your toy. But nobody touches the crystal but us. Agreed. Maxon nodded. Paladin dance. Elder. These men are under your supervision. They are to assist Ingram. If they try to sabotage the project, execute them. Dance hesitated. A microsecond of conflict flashed across his face. Understood, Elder. Ad Victoriam. Dismissed. Maxon turned back to the window, dismissing them as if they were nothing more than faulty components. They were escorted toward the engineering bay. The hum of the ship seemed louder now, oppressive. Dean, Sam whispered, leaning in close. We can't let them use the Grace. It'll burn the robot out. It might blow the whole ship. I know, Sammy. I know. So what's the plan? Dean looked at the massive blast doors ahead. He checked the weight of the 1911 in his holster. He grinned. But it didn't reach his eyes. The plan is, we fix the robot. We steal the rock. We grab Nick and the Ghoul, and we get the hell out of Dodge. That's not a plan, Sam hissed. That's a suicide note. It's worked for 15 years, Dean shrugged. Why stop now? The engineering bay was a cavern of sparks and noise. It smelled of ozone, hot grease, and the metallic tang of grinding steel. Suspended high above the deck, welders in protective cages dangled like spiders, their torches casting flickering blue shadows that danced across the walls. Dean Winchester was under the chassis of a half-dismantled T-60 suit, a heavy wrench in his hand. He was covered in grime, a smear of black grease across his cheekbone. He looked more at home here than he had in the command center. "Torque the manifold to 40," Proctor Ingram's voice cut through the din. She hovered nearby in her power armor frame, the hydraulic pistons of her legs hissing with every movement. "Don't strip it." Dean grunted, muscles straining as he tightened the bolt. "I know how to turn a wrench, Proctor. I've kept a 67 Chevy running on prayers and duct tape for 20 years. This is just bigger." "A combustion engine is cute," Ingram scoffed, checking a diagnostic slate. "This is a fusion-powered exoskeleton. If you mess up the seal, the pilot cooks inside his own suit." Dean slid out from under the armor on a creeper, He sat up, wiping his hands on a rag that was already black away with oil. "It's all just pistons and valves, sweetheart," Dean grinned, flashing a charm that usually worked on waitresses. "Just glowing ones." Ingram actually cracked a smile, a rare expression on a face hardened by war. "You're not bad, Winchester. Most civilians look at a fusion core and wet themselves. You treat it like a carburetor." Dean looked at her frame, the metal legs ending in mechanical stumps where flesh should be. "So, the suit. Permanent?" Ingram shrugged, the heavy pauldrons lifting. "Fell off a cliff during the retreat from the capital Wasteland. The armor saved my life but crushed my legs. Now, I am the armor." Dean nodded, a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. "Tough break. But hey, at least you never have to worry about finding a chair." Ingram laughed, a rusty, surprised sound. "I like you. You're efficient. Now come here. I want to show you the main event." She led him past rows of power armor stations to a massive blast door at the far end of the bay. Paladin Dance stood guard, his helmet on, arms crossed, watching Dean like a hawk watching a field mouse. Sam was already there, hunched over a terminal, scrolling through lines of green code. His face was pale in the monitor's glow. "Dean," Sam said without looking up, "you need to see this." "What is it?" Dean wiped the last of the grease from his hands. "The diagnostics for Liberty Prime. Dean, the programming. It's insane." "Insane? How?" "Tactical democracy. Non-negotiable freedom. It's programmed to recognize anything not Brotherhood as a target. Communism is defined as the very definition of failure. And we're about to plug a celestial battery into it." "Open the bay doors!" Ingram ordered into a headset. Clang hiss. The massive blast doors groaned and slid apart, revealing the main gantry. Dean stepped onto the catwalk. He looked up, and up, and up. Hanging in the gantry, secured by massive chains and cables the size of tree trunks, was Liberty Prime. 40 feet of gray steel. An American star painted on the chest plate, a head shaped like a football helmet with a laser cannon visor that looked dead and black. On its back, a rack of mini-nukes sat dormant. "Okay," Dean whispered, the sheer scale of the machine silencing his sarcasm. "That is the biggest Iron Man suit I have ever seen." "Liberty Prime," Ingram said, pride swelling in her voice. "Mark II. We pulled him out of the Potomac River in D.C., rebuilt him bolt by bolt, but his power coupling burned out." She pointed to a glowing, empty slot in the robot's back. "The fusion agitator can't handle the load of the eye laser and the nukes simultaneously." Sam walked up, looking small next to the giant's foot. "And you think the Grace crystal can?" "Your crystal has an output potential of 1.2 gigawatts, Ingram said, typing on her wrist computer. "It's infinite. If we can channel it, Prime won't just walk, he'll fly." Dean looked at the robot's dead black visor. "And if the crystal, I don't know, has an opinion?" "It's a battery," Ingram dismissed. "Batteries don't have opinions." "This one does," Sam muttered. "Enough talk." Dance stepped forward, the floor vibrating. "Elder Maxon has ordered a test. Connect the artifact." Ingram gestured to a console. The lead-lined box containing the Grace artifact was slotted into a receptor. "Initiating transfer sequence. Stabilizers on." Sam grabbed Dean's arm, his grip tight. "Dean, Grace is soul stuff. It's consciousness. If we put that into a machine designed to kill—" "We don't have a choice, Sammy," Dean whispered back. "We need the distraction to get Nick and the ghoul." "This isn't a distraction," Sam hissed. "It's a possession." "Engaging contact in 3, 2, 1. Ingram threw the heavy switch. ZZZT-crack. The box opened mechanically. The blue crystal slid into the robot's port with a wet, energetic thunk. Thrum. The entire airship shook. The lights on the gantry exploded in a shower of sparks. Liberty Prime shuddered. The chains rattled violently. The visor flickered. Usually it glowed red. Flash. It glowed blue, blinding, wholly terrifying blue. A sound filled the room. Not the mechanical whir of servos, but the sound of wings. Massive beating wings displacing air. "System! Online!" The voice boomed from the robot's chest speakers. It was distorted, metallic, but underneath the synthesis was something ancient. It echoed. It sounded Enochian. Detecting sin. Dean took a step back, hand going to his empty holster. "Sin? Did it just say sin?" "I'm losing containment," Ingram yelled, frantically checking monitors that were flashing red. "The power levels are spiking to 300%. It's rewriting the code. It's accessing the language database. Communism is an abomination. Freedom is the word of God." The robot raised a massive arm, tearing one of the restraint cables from the wall. Blue electricity arced between its fingers, scorching the metal plating. "I am online. America shall be cleansed." The blue light faded to a steady, menacing glow. The shaking stopped. The hum of the robot became a rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat. Ingram sagged against her frame, sweat beading on her forehead. "It works. It's stable." "Stable?" Dean stared at the robot, his eyes wide. "Proctor, that thing just threatened to exorcise the room." "We just put an angel in a nuclear tank," Sam realized, looking at Dean with horror. "The Elder will be pleased," Dance said, a hint of awe in his voice. "Prime is operational." Dean leaned into Sam. "New plan. We get the crystal back now, before the Iron Giant here decides to start the rapture." "How?" "It's fused to the hull," Sam whispered. "We steal the robot." Sam stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. We steal the giant robot." The hum of the grace-powered Liberty Prime was vibrating the fillings in Dean's teeth. It was a physical pressure, a constant reminder of the bomb ticking in the room. Proctor Ingram was glued to her monitors, typing furiously with both hands. Paladin Dance was shouting orders into his headset, coordinating the perimeter defense. "Okay," Dean muttered to Sam, keeping his voice below the roar of the engines. Ingram is distracted. Dance is busy playing soldier. We have maybe 5 minutes before Maxon comes down here to pop the champagne. "Dean," Sam hissed, "stealing a robot isn't like hot-wiring a car. You need launch codes. You need navigation data. You need—" "I need a distraction," Dean interrupted, scanning the room. He grabbed a heavy monkey wrench from a workbench. He slid over to a massive pipe running along the wall, labeled primary coolant, liquid nitrogen. "Hey, Proctor!" Dean shouted over the noise. "The manifold is rattling. I think the vibration loosened a seal." "Impossible," Ingram shouted back, not looking up. "That seal is welded shut." "Well, it sounds like a dying cat in a blender over here. Come check it, Ingram sighed, the hydraulics of her frame hissing as she turned away from the console. "If you broke my ship, Winchester, I will weld you to the hull." As Ingram moved toward Dean, Dean caught Sam's eye. He jerked his head toward the door. "Go!" Sam nodded. He slipped into the shadows of the gantry, moving silently toward the corridor leading to the brig. Dean waited until Ingram was close. He accidentally dropped the wrench. It clanged loudly against the pipe. "Oops, slippery hands." Ingram glared at him. "Move aside." She leaned in to inspect the pipe. Dean leaned against the console behind her. His hand hovered over a red button marked Emergency Venting. "You know," Dean grinned, "for a genius, you really should label your emergency switches better." He pressed it. Hiss! A cloud of white freezing vapor erupted from the vents. filling the lower bay with blinding fog. The temperature plummeted instantly. "Coolant leak," Ingram coughed, waving her arms. "Containment breach. Dance, seal the deck." "Scribes, evacuate the lower gantry!" Dance roared, spinning around, his laser rifle coming up. Chaos. Alarms blared. Whoop, whoop, whoop! Scribes scrambled for the exits, bumping into each other in the whiteout. In the confusion, Dean slipped away, sprinting after Sam into the corridor. Interior Pridwin? BRIG. Continuous. The brig was a row of steel cages in the bowels of the ship. It smelled of rust and despair. Nick Valentine sat on a bench, calmly smoking a cigarette he'd somehow smuggled in. The smoke curled up in perfect rings. The ghoul, Cooper Howard, was leaning against the bars, tossing a bottle cap in the air and catching it. Flip, catch, flip, catch. 2 Brotherhood guards stood watch, armored and bored. "You know," Cooper rasped to Nick, "for a toaster you got a bad habit. Where do you even put the smoke? You don't have lungs." "It's an aesthetic choice, Cooper." Nick exhaled smoke through his nose vents. "Keeps the noir atmosphere alive." "Shut up, synth," Guard 1 grunted, turning around. "Wait," Guard 2 frowned. "What's that noise?" Thud. Guard 1 dropped, hit by a fire extinguisher wielded by Sam Winchester. Guard 2 spun, raising his rifle. Clang. Dean pistol-whipped him with the butt of his 1911. The guard crumbled. "Ow!" Dean shook his hand, wincing. "These helmets are hard." Dean swiped the keys from the unconscious guard's belt. He unlocked the cell door with a rattle. "Took you long enough," Cooper stepped out, stretching his arms. "I was about to rust." "And the exit strategy?" Nick asked, stepping out. "We're 3,000 feet in the air." "We're not taking the elevator," Dean said, grabbing a laser rifle from the rack on the wall and tossing it to Nick. Cooper raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me we're jumping. My knees aren't what they used to be." "Better," Dean grinned, a wild, reckless look in his eyes. "We're hitching a ride." "We activated Liberty Prime," Sam explained, grabbing a grenade belt. Nick's mechanical eyes widened, the shutters clicking open. "You did what?" "We turned on the giant robot, and now we're gonna ride it out of here." Cooper stared at Dean. The bottle cap fell from his hand, hitting the floor with a tiny tink. "You want to ride the nuclear football robot?" "It's the only thing on this ship Maxon won't shoot down," Dean said, checking the corridor. A slow, terrifying grin spread across Cooper's face. It stretched the scarred skin tight. "I take it back," Cooper laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "You ain't naive, kid. You're completely insane." "I get that a lot," Dean said, kicking the door open. "Move to the armory, then to the big guy." They sprinted down the corridor, the alarms wailing around them, heading straight into the belly of the beast. The wind didn't just blow on the flight deck. It shrieked, a 1,000-mile-an-hour ghost tearing through the open bay. The altitude turned the air thin and sharp, tasting of ice and high-altitude ozone. Dean burst onto the upper catwalk, his boots slipping on the diamond-plated steel. Behind him, Sam, Nick, and the ghoul fanned out, weapons raised. Below, the massive form of Liberty Prime hummed with a celestial vibration that made the very air shimmer blue. Alarm klaxon. "Critical alert. Hull integrity compromised. Security to flight deck." "Hold it!" The voice was a metallic roar. Paladin Dance landed on the catwalk 20 yards ahead, his T-60 power armor denting the steel. He didn't raise his rifle. He stood like a titan, blocking the only path to the manual release lever. Behind him, 2 knights leveled their lasers, the red targeting dots dancing across Dean's chest. "Dance! Get out of the way!" Dean yelled, his voice nearly swallowed by the roar of the rotors. "You betrayed the Brotherhood, Winchester!" Dance's voice crackled through his helmet speakers. "You stole the artifact! Protocol dictates your immediate execution." "Protocol is a lie!" Dean stepped forward right into the red dots. "Look at that thing!" He pointed down at Prime. The robot's visor was pulsing with a heartbeat of pure grace. "It's not a machine anymore. It's alive. If you don't release those clamps, it's going to take this whole ship down with it." On the command bridge high above, Elder Maxon leaned over the railing, his face contorted in a mask of fanatical fury. "Paladin, eliminate them!" Maxon's voice boomed over the intercom. "That is an order." Dance's helmet turned slowly, looking up at his commander, then back at Dean. Dean could see his own reflection in the T-60's visor, small, desperate, but unafraid. "Dance," Dean said, his voice dropping intense. "You know me. You fought with me. I'm not the monster here. Don't let him kill everyone on this ship for a rock." The seconds stretched, measured by the rhythmic thrum of the Grace Corps. Dance's armored fingers twitched on his rifle. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics, he lowered the weapon. "Knight Reese, Scribe Halen," Dance barked to the soldiers behind him. "Secure the rear. Let no one through." "But Paladin, do it." Dance turned back to Dean. He stepped aside, clearing the path to the manual release. "The magnetic clamps have a 3-second delay. If you aren't on him when he drops, you're just a stain on the tarmac." "Thanks, Tin Man," Dean said. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the edge. "Dean, wait!" Sam yelled. But Dean was already airborne. He leapt into the void. The world vanished. There was only the roar of the wind in his ears and the terrifying, stomach-flipping sensation of weightlessness. He reached out, his fingers clawing at the freezing, blue-tinted steel of Liberty Prime's shoulder. Clang! His chest slammed into the armor. The air left his lungs in a silent gasp. He scrambled for a grip, his hands finding a heavy coolant cable as the world tilted. "Jump!" Dean screamed, his voice lost in the gale. One by one, they followed. Sam hit the missile rack. Nick's magnetic feet locked onto the chassis with a violent jolt. The ghoul landed with the grace of a cat, his duster snapping like a whip. "Manual release engaged," Dance's voice echoed one last time. Screech! The massive magnetic locks shattered. The Prydwen groaned, lurching upward as 40 tons of steel were suddenly subtracted from its weight. Liberty Prime dropped, and the Winchesters went with him. The fall was absolute. They plummeted through the clouds, the city of Boston rushing up to meet them like a floor made of jagged glass. The wind was so violent it felt like it was trying to peel the skin off Dean's face. "Sammy, turn it on!" Dean roared, his eyes watering so hard he was nearly blind. Sam was clinging to the robot's head, his legs wrapped around the neck joint. "I'm trying! It's not responding to the override!" "It's an Angel battery, Sam! Stop thinking like a tech and start thinking like a vessel!" Sam squeezed his eyes shut. He pressed his forehead against the cold, vibrating metal of the helmet. He felt the grace inside, the humming, ancient power that didn't belong in this century. "Zazas! Rea Aeolus! Ascend!" Sam's voice ripped through the air, spoken in the guttural melodic tongue of the angels. Flash. Liberty Prime's visor didn't just glow, it erupted. A halo of blue fire crowned the robot's head. "Command, aye. Acknowledged. Mission accepted." Whoosh! The thrusters ignited. It wasn't the orange flame of kerosene. It was a column of pure, white-hot light. The G-force hit Dean like a physical punch, pinning him against the shoulder plates. The descent slowed from a terminal fall to a controlled, thundering hover. They were flying. A 40-foot nuclear robot was surfing the thermals over Boston. "Woohoo!" Dean let out a manic, jagged laugh. "You see that? We're doing it! Don't get cocky! the ghoul yelled, pointing back toward the airship. Two vertibirds were diving out of the clouds, their nose cannons spitting tracers. Ping, ping, ping! Bullets sparked off Prime's armor inches from Dean's head. Hostile aircraft detected, Prime's voice boomed, vibrating through Dean's very bones. Engaging! Red, Chinese, Air Force! Prime's head tilted up. The blue visor hummed, a sound like a choir singing a single violent note. ZZZZZRT. A beam of blue grace energy, thick as a redwood tree, sliced through the sky. It didn't explode the late vertibird, it simply erased it. The metal turned to blue ash in an instant, the debris scattered by the wind. The second vertibird banked hard, spiraling away in a desperate maneuver. Target verified, Prime announced. He adjusted his trajectory, the thrusters roaring louder. Institute location confirmed. Probability of mission hindrance, 0%. They banked hard, leaning into a turn that nearly threw them off. Below, the CIT ruins loomed, a white domed rotunda surrounded by the shattered remains of a university. Dean looked at the blue light arcing off the robot's fingers. He looked at Sam, who was glowing faintly with the reflected power. For the first time since they had arrived in this hellhole, Dean stopped feeling like a victim. He gripped the shoulder plating, a wild, dangerous grin spreading across his face. "Hey, Prime!" Dean yelled into the wind. "Give 'em hell!" "America will never fall," the robot replied. They streaked across the skyline, a blue comet of divine retribution, heading straight for the heart of the machine. The sky over Cambridge didn't just break, it shattered. Liberty Prime descended like a falling star of chrome and blue fire. As his massive steel feet impacted the CIT courtyard, the sound was less a crash and more a geological event. A shock wave of holy blue electricity rippled outward, turning the surrounding asphalt into molten glass. Dean rolled off the robot's shoulder as it landed, his boots hitting the cracked pavement with a bone-jarring thud. He didn't wait for the dust to settle. He was already up, his 1911 in hand, eyes stinging from the grit and the blinding radiance of the robot's core. "Sammy! Nick! Move!" Liberty Prime stood in the center of the crater, his visor pulsing a jagged, erratic rhythm. Institute. Shield. Detected. Initiating liberation. Burst! The robot reached behind its back. Grasping a mini nuke that was vibrating so violently, it hummed in a frequency that made Dean's nose bleed. Prime didn't throw it. He slammed it into the ground at his feet. Kaboom! The explosion wasn't orange. It was a pillar of pure white-blue light that punched through the earth, bypassing the Institute's shielding by sheer celestial force. The ground fell away. A jagged, smoking vertical tunnel opened into the white, sterile depths of the facility below. "Into the hole!" Dean yelled. They slid down the rubble-strewn shaft, landing in a hallway that looked like it belonged in a hospital from a nightmare. It was too clean, too white. The air smelled of fluoride, ozone, and the rising metallic heat of a dying sun. Nick Valentine took the lead, his yellow eyes scanning the corridors. "The reactor is at the core. Follow the power conduits." They sprinted through the concourse. Synths teleported in with sharp electronic cracks, but they were disjointed. Their logic loops fried by the grace pulse Prime had delivered. The ghoul moved like a dervish of leather and lead, his hand cannon barking with rhythmic regularity. Each shot took a synth in the neck seal, heads popping off in showers of white hydraulic fluid. "Left, through the arboretum!" Sam shouted, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. They burst into the reactor chamber. It was a cathedral of forbidden science, a massive cylindrical room dominated by a glowing blue column. the reactor. But suspended in the center of the reaction chamber, held by magnetic tethers, was the Grace crystal. It was no longer a shard. It had grown, fed by the Institute's power, turning into a jagged, screaming diamond of raw divinity. The heat in the room was rising, 110, 120 degrees, making the air shimmer. "Stop right there." The voice was thin, reedy, and ancient. Standing at the control console was Father, Sean. He looked frail, his white lab coat hanging off a skeletal frame, but his eyes were sharp with the cold arrogance of a creator. "You have destroyed a century of progress," Sean said, his voice echoing in the hum of the reactor. "For what? To return to a world of dirt and radiation?" Dean stepped forward, the heat curling the edges of his leather jacket. "To return to a world that's real, kid. This is a dollhouse for ghosts." "Father, move!" Sam yelled as the reactor began to vent steam. "It's going to blow!" "Let it," Sean whispered. Dean didn't wait for the debate. He ran. He leapt over the console, his boots skidding on the pristine floor. He reached the containment glass. It was hot enough to blister skin. "Sam, the override!" Sam's fingers blurred over the terminal. "Containment disengaged!" The glass hissed open. The roar of the crystal was deafening now, a choir of 1 billion voices screaming at once. Dean didn't use a tool. He wrapped his hand in his jacket and reached in. The second his fingers touched the crystal, the world turned white. He felt his memories being flayed, his soul laid bare. He saw the fire in Lawrence. He saw the cage in hell. He saw every person he couldn't save. "Dean!" Sam's voice sounded miles away. "I got you!" Dean roared. He yanked the crystal from its housing. The room went dark for a heartbeat, then turned a violent, strobing red. The gravity shifted. Masonry began to fall from the domed ceiling, white tiles shattering like porcelain. "Go, go, go!" They scrambled back toward the elevator, Dean clutching the glowing, vibrating crystal to his chest like a holy relic. The facility was moaning, the structural steel twisting as the vacuum of the reactor collapse began to pull the Institute into itself. The silence of the garage, the taste of a cold, cheap American beer. The relay spat them out onto the surface just as the ground beneath the CIT rotunda sank 30 feet. The air was a storm of ash. Liberty Prime stood at the edge of the sinkhole, his armor blackened, his blue visor fading. He looked at Dean, one massive steel hand raised in a slow mechanical salute. "Mission accomplished. America. IS saved." Boom! The reactor below detonated. A pillar of blue-white fire erupted from the earth, vaporizing the remains of the university. The shockwave hit them like a physical wall, throwing them toward the edge of the courtyard. And there she was. The Impala sat idling near the gate, the engine a low, comforting rumble. Preston Garvey and Piper were already clear, waving them on. Dogmeat was barking frantically from the backseat window. "Baby!" Dean scrambled into the driver's seat, the leather hot against his legs. "Sammy, get in!" Sam dove into the passenger side. Nick and the Ghoul stood by the window, the blue light of the impending explosion reflecting in their eyes. "It's been a slice, Kansas," the Ghoul rasped, tipping his hat. "You're a hell of a detective, Nick," Sam said, reaching out to shake the metal hand one last time. "Keep your nose clean, boys," Nick replied, "and keep that car on the road." Dean looked at the dash. The crystal in his hand was pulsing a final, desperate rhythm. The rift was opening 50 yards ahead, a jagged tear in the fabric of the universe, gold and blue and smelling of home. "Here goes nothing." Dean jammed the grace crystal into the cassette slot. The Impala didn't just move, it transcended. The headlights turned into twin beams of celestial light. The engine note climbed to a frequency that shattered the windshield. Dean slammed the car into gear. The tires roared, smoking against the ruined asphalt. They hit 60, 70, 80. The blue wall of the nuclear blast was inches from the rear bumper, a wave of annihilation erasing the world. They hit the rift. White out. The noise stopped. The heat stopped. There was a moment of absolute terrifying silence, where Dean felt like he was made of nothing but static. He couldn't feel the wheel. He couldn't feel his heart. Thud. Gravity returned with the force of a falling anvil. The Impala slammed onto the concrete floor of the Men of Letters garage. The tires shrieked, the car skidding sideways and stopping inches from a tool bench. The engine sputtered once and died. Dean sat there. His hands were still locked on the wheel. He was shaking. He looked down at the dashboard. The Grace crystal was gone. In its place, the cassette slot was filled with fine, sparkling gray dust. It had burned itself out to get them across. "Sam," Dean whispered. Sam was leaning back against the seat, eyes closed, chest heaving. Yeah, Dean. We're here." Dean opened the door. The air didn't taste like sulfur. It tasted like damp concrete, old paper, and motor oil. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever smelled. He stepped out, his legs nearly giving way. He looked at the Impala. She was covered in Wasteland dust, her paint scorched, a Nuka-Cola cap wedged in the grill. She looked like she'd been through a war. "You did good, baby," Dean murmured, patting the hood. Sam climbed out, looking at the quiet, dimly lit garage. No sirens, no giant robots, no monsters screaming about chicken. "We made it," Sam said, a small, weary smile breaking through the grime on his face. Dean walked over to the small, beat-up fridge in the corner. He opened it. It was stocked with cheap domestic beer, no radiation, no mute fruit extract, just hops and water. He cracked two open, the hiss of the carbonation sounding like a victory march. He handed one to Sam. Dean took a long, slow pull of the beer. It was cold, it was bitter, it was perfect. "You know," Dean said, leaning back against the Impala's fender, staring at the ceiling of the bunker. "That Cooper guy? For a zombie? He could shoot. And Nick," Sam added, "I think I'm going to miss him." Dean reached into his pocket and pulled out the red Nuka-Cola cap. He flipped it into the air, the metal catching the light, before catching it and tucking it into his pocket. "Maybe," Dean said. He looked at the library door where the rest of their life was waiting. "But I've had enough atomic blues to last a lifetime." He clinked his bottle against Sam's. "Driver picks the music," Dean said. "Shotgun shuts his cake hole," Sam replied. Dean grinned. They were home.